Thank you, Kelly. Good day, colleagues. I am Aerian Tatum, Assistant Professor here at Coppin State University. I am excited about the possibilities of this afternoon and want you to know that the bulk of our time today will be spent focusing on our topic at hand, structural inequalities. I must tell you that this town hall was birthed out of many difficult discussions, experiences, and disappointments had by faculty. On this very campus, our faculty senate had a conversation that shed light on not only how people of color are feeling, but how other marginalized members of our community felt. This past year, we were all required to shelter in place. This mandate allowed us to become aware of situations and circumstances that we normally may have been too busy to notice. This past year, we were not as distracted as we were and were compelled to tune into social injustices of this country. The coronavirus pandemic placed social justice on a nationwide platform for all to see. This time, the world had no choice but to see how racial injustice affects people of color. There was no denying what was happening when we watched with our own undistracted eyes a cell phone video taken by a 17-year-old hero as life slowly faded from George Floyd. Had this young lady not taken a moment to care about what was on display before her, this violent act too would have gone unnoticed. Today is the start of our opportunity to do so as well. The Structural Inequities Subcommittee of CUSF was created to bring awareness and help to produce solutions that bring forth change in our workplaces. Dr. Ana Maria Soto of Towson State University leads this committee, and the members are Dr. Mark Pound of University of Maryland College Park, Dr. Lorenda Naylor, University of Baltimore, Dr. Ben Ara of Bowie State University, as well as Dr. Daniel Aniwu of Bowie State University, and Dr. James Manley of Towson State University. In January, Dr. Soto led us in an excellent panel discussion on structural racism. Afterward, it was felt that more great public discussions were needed, not only to talk about our experiences, but to give our remarkable, knowledgeable, and capable faculty full of change makers, writers, leaders, subject matter experts, influencers, and inspirational professionals an opportunity to bring forward solutions that will make everyone feel included and hopefully equal. Today is our first attempt. After very brief greetings from both the president and provost of Coppin State University, I will introduce our moderator for the afternoon, and we will dive right into our conversation. I am very happy to introduce our president, Dr. Anthony Jenkins. This month makes 1 year since he began his presidency. Taking the reins of an HBCU at the height of a pandemic was no easy feat. However, Dr. Jenkins jumped in with both feet and continues to lead us through these unprecedented times. Dr. Jenkins, the floor is yours.
Dr. Tatum, thank you very much. Professor Tatum, I greatly appreciate that introduction. I want to also thank the Council of University System faculty and welcome you to the beautiful campus of Coppin State University. Now, it would ultimately and ideally be my hope that you could physically be on our beautiful campus today, but because of the environment that we're in, we're going to bring you all these beautiful backdrops and all of this beautiful navy and gold throughout this very important discussion that you're going to have today. But let me say this, the conversation that you're having today is extremely important. It is these types of conversations that we need to have across the entire landscape of higher education. We are the educated ones. We're the ones with all of these letters and degrees behind our names. And if our institutions can't come together and talk about these very important life-altering issues, then where else can our society do it? So I am thrilled to tune in and watch today and listen and learn And I'm thrilled that we're having this important discussion at this important moment in time and on a national stage and talking about all of these important factors. So I just wanted to say again, welcome. Thank you for having this important discussion and having it here at Coppin. And so Professor Tatum and to all of the panelists who will be talking today, let's go have a great discussion. Let's lift and increase people's IQ across the board as it comes to this issue and so many other issues that impact our total society. Thank you, and y'all have a wonderful conference and discussion today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I appreciate you. Dr. Leontye Lewis, our provost, works tirelessly advocating, leading, and teaching. Her passion for Coppin can be felt whenever we hear her say the name Coppin. She is an alumnus of this great institution and is here today to also bring greetings. Dr. Lewis?
Thank you so much, Professor Tatum. I thank you for that introduction. And yes, Coppin is in my blood. And it is in my blood because the very topic that you're talking about is a history of our institution. And so when I welcome you to Coppin State to this virtual platform, I'm welcoming you to a historical university that has experienced the topics that you're going to cover today. And so these topics existed then, they exist now. And I'm hoping, as Dr. Jenkins said, with the breadth and depth of experience and knowledge that we have on this panel, that we have listening to us, that we will get some insights into how we can finally break these chains, these struggles, overcome these obstacles so that the solutions that you're looking for, we can recognize them, we can use them so that we support faculty, we support communities, because when we do that, we're supporting our students. We are lifting them up once we address these obstacles that impede their path and impede our efforts to get there. And as you said, Professor Tatum, this is not going to be an easy conversation to have. We see others try, but the important thing is we try. We try, and if we keep trying, if you keep knocking on this door, we are going to break through so that we can have the sense of equality and justice that we must have in order for us to continue to persevere, to excel, and to bring so many others behind us. And so I thank CUSF, I thank the panelists, and I thank everyone who is a part of this, that committee that you mentioned, to make use of this opportunity to have this tough, necessary, forward-thinking, right-on-time conversation. Thank you. Welcome to my alma mater, Coppin State University. Have a wonderful discussion, and I look forward to hearing the solutions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. I appreciate you and taking time for us today. So now I'd like to introduce our panelist, Dr. Lorenda Naylor. She is an associate professor in the School of Public and International Affairs and the program director for the undergraduate degree in Politics, Policy, and International Affairs. She trains public servants to make a difference in their communities, cities, and countries. Let's see. Dr. Naylor is on the U.S. Fulbright Scholar Specialist roster and is an international scholar. Her research focuses on ensuring democratic values, equity, justice, and representation are reflected in public policy outcomes. She has written on the following subjects: affirmative action, diversity, education, health, LGBT, and pedagogy. Dr. Naylor has distinguished herself as one of the top 10 scholars in public administration pedagogy. She has over 30 publications and has delivered over 65 presentations. She earned her PhD in public administration from the American University in Washington, D.C. She has a master's in public health degree from the University of Kansas Medical School and a master's of public administration from Kansas State University. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Naylor.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tatum. And thank you, and as well as Coppin State University for bringing this panel, this important panel, into fruition. I know it took a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. I also want to give a shout out to Kelly for doing the technology for us as well. It makes it easier for the rest of us, so thank you. And thank you for your gracious hospitality here today. I have the pleasure and the delight of introducing our panelists today. And first I want to mention that Dr. Tolson sends her regrets. She's not able to join us today. She wished she could be here, but it just didn't work out. So we will miss her. Our three panelists today, first is Dr. April Logan. She is an associate professor of English at Salisbury University. She earned her doctor's as well as her master's degree in English from Temple University and her bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia. Her research interests are primarily focused in African-American literature, American literature, women's studies, and performance studies. So we extend a warm welcome to Dr. April Logan. Thank you for joining us today. Our next panelist is Dr. Kimberly Griffin. She is a professor in higher education, student affairs, and international education policy program at the University of Maryland, College Park. She earned her doctoral degree in higher ed and organizational change from UCLA, her master's degree in education policy and leadership at the University of Maryland, and her bachelor's degree in psychology from Stanford University. Her research interests are diversity, equity in graduate education, and diversity within Black higher education community. She also serves as the editor for the journal Diversity and Higher Education. Please extend a warm welcome to Dr. Kimberly Griffin. We're grateful you're able to join us today. Our third panelist is Dr. Ayanna Lynch, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Bowie State University. She earned her doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Howard University and her bachelor degree as well from Howard University. Her research interests are primarily focused on child and adolescent psychology, HIV, as well as AIDS research. She also serves on the faculty senate chair at Bowie State University. We have three extraordinary panelists, gifted scholars, and major student advocates with us today. And so I want to thank all of them for joining us and taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. As Professor Tatum said, our goal today is really to create a dialogue and a robust conversation on faculty diversity. We're going to identify challenges and also create solutions. Our format this afternoon, I will provide background information to provide the context of the question, and then I will pose that question. Then each panelist will have 5 to 10 minutes to answer each question. So I would like to start out. The first one, as mentioned by Professor Tatum, I believe also our president at Coppin State University, has to do with student diversity. Women have represented the majority of bachelor earning adults since 1982. So for several decades, women have achieved the greatest amount of degrees over men, with females earning 57% of bachelor's degrees in 2018. Since 1982, women have earned the greatest percentage of master's degrees. Since 2006, females have earned the greatest percentage of PhDs. So across the board, in regards to gender, we have met equity. In regards to student race and ethnicity, however, more work needs to be done in increasing educational attainment. Only 10% of American Indian Alaskan Natives have a bachelor's degree, 11% of Hispanic people, 14% of African Americans, 22% in the category of other, which is mostly biracial, 23% of Caucasians, and 32% of Asians have obtained a bachelor's degree. We know that diversity matters. And a recent report by Georgetown University states that the lack of student equity, which is going to be tied to faculty equity, the lack of student equity costs the US economy approximately $946 billion annually. It is tremendous in the cost in terms of racial injustice. In regards to race and ethnicity, college students are twice as likely to be Black compared to faculty members, and 4 times as likely to be Hispanic than faculty members. And that's from the Pew Research Center in 2019. This means that minority faculty are underrepresented in universities, not only here in Maryland, but across the country. In the field of public administration, we have a theory, and it's called representative bureaucracy. And it says that government employees should reflect back and mirror back the people or students that they serve. This is true in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, and now due to US Supreme Court rulings, and also includes sexual orientation as well as gender identity. So with that context and that backdrop, we know it's important that students need to see faculty members that look like them or identify with them. And my question to our panelists is this: how critical do you believe this is to student success and student outcomes? And Dr. Griffin, I will start with you. If you would lead us off on that, that would be terrific.
Sure. I was about to say, where shall we begin? So thank you so much. It's such important framing, and thank you again for the generous invitation to be with all of you today. So I'm going to start by answering your question directly, and then I'm going to add an and, if that's okay. So first, yes, I think it is critical that students with marginalized and minoritized identities see themselves in the faculty. Extant research tells us that when students have the opportunity to engage with faculty members that either share their identity or also have marginalized and minoritized identities, their aspirations are higher, they perform better, they're more likely to be retained. I can speak from my own personal experience. It's been so important to see myself in the faculty, that my aspirations to become a professor only really started when I had a Black woman as a faculty member and I could literally see myself enter that kind of role. So I think it is critically important. And we also know that faculty members of color often articulate a very special commitment to supporting and working closely with and mentoring the next generation of scholars. So they are in many ways showing up and present for those students in a way that helps them and supports them through the academy. So I'm going to share my and. So yes, I think it's critically important that faculty of color be present, representation be increased in the academy to support students. And I think we have to be mindful and remember that shared identity and look like is not the same as identify with. That there are times when people who share your identities are not in line with your values, they're not in line with your goals, they may not be the best mentor and role model for you. So what's, I think, more important is to really think about how can we encourage all faculty members to be equally invested in the success and in supporting students of color, and recognizing the unique role that faculty members of color play in that, but that we really need to see this as all of our responsibility. And the final point I'll make on that is that in doing that, that keeps us from shifting all of this labor to our colleagues of color. I know we're going to come back to this conversation later around service burden and mentoring burden, but when we see it as the unique role and responsibility of African-American, of Latinx, of Native American, of Asian American faculty members to support students, and because of the disparities that you mentioned, that they're so much more heavily represented, it shifts so much labor to those faculty members. It means that they're going to be carrying this heavier service burden, which they very well might be interested and engaged in doing, but it also is a lot of emotional work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. And I'm sure for folks in the audience who are also faculty members, we don't have many places to write that kind of work down as we're talking about advancement, as we're talking about promotion, as we're talking about tenure. And it draws time away from the work that does get counted. So I think, yes, and we need to increase the representation of faculty because they are critical to the support of our students, and we need to invest everybody in that work.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin. Thank you for your insights. Very, very helpful. Dr. Logan, would you like to add your comments and insights to that question?
I think Dr. Griffin's answer was more or less perfect. I'll just add a few things to it. I just want to emphasize, yes, seeing someone who looks like you in some ways makes it possible for you to dream, and then goes into, so how come we don't see as many minorities, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, all of that going on and getting a master's or PhD, because they don't see many people who look like them in front of the classroom. So that limits their dreams and what they see as possible. But I want to talk about more tangible ways, and I think Dr. Griffin somewhat alluded to it. When we have these faculty who have an investment in terms of, social justice, support of diversity and inclusion, this also relates to issues of access to networking, networking as far as in your professional field, opportunities in terms of fellowships and Fulbrights. And many studies have shown that those who are at front of the classroom also play a big role in sort of deciding which students have potential, right? And often when we're looking at our students deciding who has potential, who would I love to mentor, who needs my mentoring, it usually is someone who sort of looks like us. And so in a very real, tangible, practical way, it sort of cuts out a whole lot of students if someone just can't imagine that that student is worthy of mentoring. Is worthy of putting a name forward to look into a Fulbright or some other type of grant program or some type of special internship or mentoring. And so, like I said, someone to piggyback on what Dr. Griffin said, yes, we need more faculty of color, but we also need perhaps some training or work with our faculty who are not minorities to help open their eyes and see, diamonds in the, across the classroom, diamonds and students of diverse backgrounds and experiences, because it does affect them in terms of employment, professional opportunities, and going on and pursuing higher education.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. Very helpful, very, very insightful. Thank you. Next, I would like to call on Dr. Ayanna Lynch. If you could provide us with your insights, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you were going to the next question. I was like, I want to chime in. Okay, great. I echo everything that I've heard. I don't know, I was trying to sit still while I was hearing, but I'm applauding and rooting over here because everything that I've heard has been absolutely on point. I think the only thing I want to add to the conversation is that I know we're speaking specifically of the Academy, but the statistics that you've shared with us also reflect the lack of diversity in educators at many levels of education. And so thinking about this question made me think of my own experience. I'm from California, which is a very diverse state, but I can count on one hand the number of African-American educators that I've had. There was one in my elementary, Miss Brown. I realized I know her still if I see her on the street because she was so beloved. Everyone hoped they could get into her class, and she was only one person and couldn't teach the entire 6th grade, but if she could, we would. But she was someone having that representation that mattered. And I can count again the number of people that I saw in educational spaces on one hand throughout my early career. So I think the points that have been made about the importance of recruiting faculty, but also I think the point that Dr. Logan made about making it attractive to students. We have to do a better job of preparing future faculty and finding those students who might not otherwise consider a career in the Academy and making it look attractive, and more importantly, preparing them for that, so that mentoring absolutely matters. I also think the point of realizing that the onus is on all of the faculty to broaden and diversify the opportunities for all faculty to recruit other people that they know that could be potential faculty members, as well as their students. I think that is absolutely critical to doing that. I just want to echo Dr. Griffin's point that shared identity is not the same as representation. That cannot be stated enough. And that that also goes back to our intention as institutions to be deliberate and to really double down on what we say is a high priority and a value of making sure that we have many people, and diversity is not just in making sure that the racial makeup looks like the census, but also just making sure that we recognize that not one group is a monolith. And so you need more than a diversity, right? You need several people who represent several people in that particular diversity category, because all of those experiences bring richness and depth that our students need to see, and not just students of color. I just want to make sure and underrepresented groups. I think it's equally important. We could save this part of the conversation for later when we talk about curriculum, but it's equally important that students who have not, similar to me, have not had very many opportunities to be educators of color. It is imperative that those students also be exposed to the brilliance, the knowledge, the experiences of people who have very different walks of life and perspectives and values and traditions and norms than they do. I think that's going to be important to exposing our students to be the game changers and the thought leaders that we need them to be when they leave the academy.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Excellent, excellent comments. Appreciate it. The next topic question I want to bring in, and it ties directly to faculty diversity. So Dr. Lynch, thank you for providing that segue, that transition. Appreciate it. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, and these are based on 2017, universities across the country, there is a shortage of female as well as minority faculty members at all ranks, with the biggest shortage at the full professor level, which is the senior level. For example, as faculty ranking increases from assistant to associate to full, there have been fewer women and fewer minorities represented. And the data looks like this: 27% of assistant professors are minority, compared to 19% of full professors. And 53% of assistant professors are women, compared to only 35% of full professors. So as the rank as a professor goes up, the number of women and minority in the past have decreased. From your perspective, what obstacles or barriers exist that prevent minorities and women from advancing in rank and salary within the academy? And I would like to start with Dr. Logan. If you would take the lead on this question, I'd certainly appreciate it.
So thank you. I should have said thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. And I have quite a bit to say in response to this question. So if you will just humor me. And I also just want to sort of give a standpoint for my position. I am at a predominantly white institution on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So that's also a rural area. So first I'd like to say that, you know, a lot of us think of academia as somehow the last bastion of a meritocracy in society. We think that, you know, we have these particular criteria, you know, if you publish, we have student evaluations, we can look at all these things and we can be fair and just when we're making determinations of tenure and promotion, hiring, all that. But that is just simply not true. I mean, we're here to talk about structural inequality, systemic inequality, racism, all the isms that you can think about. And so we have to look at the idea that even within academia, within institutions of higher education, bias and arbitrariness are certainly operating. And so I'll go sort of where I want to start first, just to answer to your question. A few of the biggest obstacles and barriers that I see that are prevalent in the advancement of underprivileged groups are: one, the intersections of racism and sexism. Let's make it plain. That's also in higher ed. And then secondly, a lack of awareness about the power of white privilege. And so what I want to say with this, and now I want to be more specific. I'm assuming we have many underrepresented groups getting PhDs, getting masters, getting into tenure track positions, but somehow we're dropping the ball as far as getting them to tenure before we can even talk about full professor, getting them tenured. So one of the things I want to put out there is that sometimes when people from these underrepresented groups get into trouble on the tenure track, they kind of keep it to themselves. They feel like, oh, I must have done something wrong. You know, I'm not good enough. I don't want to talk about this. And it makes sense because everyone in academia, including people in the underrepresented groups, are taught to somewhat see people in the underrepresented groups, especially people of color, as somehow inferior, not quite good enough. They're not going to measure up. There's almost an expectation of that. So if someone comes and starts saying to you that the person isn't measuring up, well, you know, due to lack of awareness, you're almost going to believe it. But let me go back to what happens with the isolation. So you don't speak up when you start sort of wondering, something doesn't seem right. Something seems unfair. I'm checking off all the boxes, but they're telling me it's not good enough. Don't keep that to yourself. Please find someone to talk to. Find an ally or a mentor. Be strategic, be selective. Maybe one of your professors from graduate school. And then there's people out there who can help you, because sometimes it is not your fault, frankly, it is by design. When we look at the statistics that Dr. Naylor shared, there's something much larger than you as an individual operating, and it often is some type of systemic ism. And so you want to think about how to work towards your goal of becoming tenured and then getting promotion within that system. What are your strategies and how you're going to navigate that? We can certainly talk about the importance of publishing and other steps that you can take to protect yourself in this process, but we have to be very plain that people are going up against systemic isms in academia when they're going up for tenure and promotion. And if they start to see a problem, you should feel comfortable to reach out. And you're probably going to throw a stone and hit someone in the back because your mentors as a faculty member, your friend in the other department, they're going through the same thing. You're thinking, I'm terrible, I'm awful, and you find out, wow, this is like in a lot of people's story. The other thing I want to talk about is that even looking at the statistics, a very powerful solution, I think, is greater solidarity among white women and what I'll say other underrepresented groups and minorities. When we consider the statistics, it's clear that all women in academia are still grappling with sexism and misogyny in the workplace. And I'm sure, Dr. Naylor, you've got some stories that you could share. A lot of women are dealing with this, not just women of color. However, white women do have some power in terms of their whiteness. White women are making much more significant gains than minority people. Now, even when we look at your statistics, I think it collapsed together minority men and women. So what we can see is that white women, are almost twice, I'm terrible at math, I'm an English professor, there's almost twice as many white women as people of color reaching full professor. That's a pretty major statistic. So I'm sorry, I don't have the exact statistics, but I'm pretty sure it's only about 2.3% of women of color that even become tenured faculty. Just think about that, 2%. That is a very small number. So I'm gonna just make a huge ask, and it's a big ask because it will, for some people, it's gonna be experienced as a tremendous amount of risk. Maybe you're risking alienation. Maybe you're risking being ostracized. Maybe you're gonna lose some type of tangible benefits and privileges, but I really would like to ask my white women sisters in particular who have made it to the other side in terms of tenure and promotion, who are in those rooms when decisions are being made about tenure and promotion, to really speak up when people are raising questions of whether or not that underrepresented person is meeting the criteria. Because it's going to happen. They're going to, they might raise questions, but what you need to say is, I want to see the paperwork. I want to look at the numbers. Who's ever asking that question, whether it's your chair, whether your colleagues questioning whether or not they're making that criteria, you want to ask for evidence. And second of all, what I should say is, maybe they're not measuring up, but then you need to look around the room at all your colleagues and say, did everybody else here meet all those criteria? Or do we not already have some full professors and other people who didn't meet that criteria either? Yet here they are, tenured and being full professors. So again, I'm not saying, white women are certainly experiencing this, but you also have some power. And so I'm asking you, and I'm not saying some of our white male colleagues, black male colleagues, whatever privilege you have, it needs to be brought to the fore when your colleagues or from underrepresented groups are not in those rooms. And I think that that's critical. And also, I'd like to pause just to say that at Salisbury University, I have a lot of white women sisters who are doing this, and they're holding it down. And I just want to say that when the women of color and white women at SU stand together, we're a force to be reckoned with. So I also just want to add to that. So there's another way that we can be brought into rooms around mentoring too, right? A lot of your colleagues say, well, we're just friends. And when I say rooms, I'm not just talking about official public meetings. I'm talking about at bars. I'm talking about hanging out with their kids. We're not always invited. People from LGBTQ people aren't always invited. People who are disabled aren't always invited. But if you're invited, get that information, carry it back to your underrepresented colleagues. These are the committees you should be on. I'm not trying to name any names, but just so you know, someone is asking questions about XYZ. I mean, you can provide that mentoring that we're not going to get because we're not invited to the bar for whatever reasons. Some people say, well, you just like to hang out with people who you're like. Maybe, okay, but then that creates some type of inequity. An article that I encourage everyone to read is called Relating to Privilege, Seduction and Rejection in the Subordination of White Women and Women of Color. And it really talks about this issue of, how white women can use their privilege and how they're somewhat seduced due to their privilege and their whiteness. But also,
I'm sorry, can you repeat the title?
I'll type it into the chat when I'm done. The other thing is, I would say to my white colleagues, can you please educate yourself about discrimination against minorities happening in academia? There's a wealth of material about this, statistics, studies, testimonials. Why am I asking you to read this? And so that you won't be complicit in racism. Because sometimes our white colleagues, without knowing, they get wrapped up in a situation that is an ism. But they don't, but you're not aware, you're not looking at it with those lenses, okay? So what I'm saying is start that lens today. Look around your department. Is there a position that for some bizarre reason, we've had 3 people of color cycle in and out of, we just can't find someone that can meet the criteria? Start asking those questions, doing that research, reading those articles so that if something starts happening, you can recognize it. Bulletproof yourself against being unknowingly complicit in acts of racism. And so, and the mentoring should be ongoing. When that person comes into your department, be on it. Start from day one. Whether they call you or not, invite them out to this goes back to what Dr. Griffin said. Everybody should be on it, including the white colleagues. You want to have more underrepresented people in your department, give them some of that mentoring. And then going back to networking, I talked about the networking. Sometimes that can happen outside of that. The other part of the problem is unclear and vague criteria for tenure and promotion. This is huge. Now, some people will say, well, I like it because it's kind of vague and ambiguous, because then you can kind of reward a person more in one area, like if they're not so good here. But often that's not how it happens. Usually not with underrepresented people. Usually that vagueness is used to do just the opposite. With such ambiguity, anything and everything, even a lack of collegiality, can be used to encourage a faculty member to leave through subtle harassment, bringing it up, or outright denial of tenure. A person in an underrepresented group should be able to look at your departmental criteria and your institutional handbook and it should be very plain what it is they need to do to achieve tenure and then promotion. It should be quantified in some way, shape, or form. And so that's where a lot of the, as I like to call, funny business takes place. And then the last piece, we talked about salary. And I've had many conversations with, especially my women colleagues about this, and it really hurts my heart because some of them are, I'll say to them, hey, you're going up for promotion. You should ask for a salary bump. And they're like, oh no, April, you started some crazy business. They're very uncomfortable with it, okay? Many women are resistant to negotiating for salary and benefits when they're hired and then when they're promoted. We must work collectively toward normalizing women seeking and asking for what they are worth. It has to be normalized, not seen as special or different or strange. We should regularly provide workshops on negotiating salary and promotion at professional meetings, and then it will become more common. And so those, I'm sorry, I talked a long time, but those are my thoughts. We can talk about everything before tenure and promotion, but I'm assuming there's a lot of excellence amongst underrepresented groups. You can have all the mentoring, all the professional development, all the whole 9 you want, but if you don't deal with the funny business that goes on between tenure and promotion, it's a complete waste of time.
Okay.
Dr. Logan, thank you. Thank you. I was taking notes quickly, and you had several themes. One of them was this culture of solidarity. And it seems like you were able to bring that to fruition at your own institution, Salisbury University, with other women. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's a very empowering aspect as well. And I also took notes regarding clear tenure guidelines, as well as salary negotiation, and a couple of other items as well. One of the things that strikes me, and I'm going to ask Dr. Griffin to comment here as well. It seems like, and I read this in the store, so I'm not taking credit for it, but I think it's very powerful. And it brings everything you just said collectively together. And it states, empowered women empower other women. And I think that can be true for minorities and for any underrepresented group. And I'm going to put that over to the side there because I think that's what we can build on in terms of momentum. How do we achieve it, and how do we continue and make that a clear path for other women? But thank you for your comments. Very, very insightful, and you're so authentic, and that is where your power is. And I just, excellent to everything you said. So thank you. Thank you. Dr. Griffin, would you like to add anything to Dr. Logan, or share your perceptions, your experiences, any suggestions?
Sure. So my first response to the data that you shared kind of made me think about the approach institutions often take to faculty diversity more generally. They take more of a diversity outcome focused approach. Let's increase the number of folks who are here, which means we're going to focus on hiring. And we're not going to think as much about how we ensure that people are successful and are able to are able to navigate processes and be promoted and feel rewarded and like there's a sense of belonging once they're there. Let's just get them in the door so that our numbers look better. So the first is a diversity-based approach. An equity-based approach is more focused on, does everybody have the resources that they need to be successful, even if those resources may look different? And what are we doing as an institution that's getting in the way of folks' success? So if we see inequities like the ones you described, we don't look at candidates and say, well, I just need you to produce more. I just need you to do this. I just need you to do that. What's wrong with our structures and our systems that's resulting in these outcomes, and what can we do to change them and to do better? So I really resonated with what April was sharing about the meritocracy, in the sense that we're a meritocratic organization. Surely our criteria are fair and equally applied across everybody, but research suggests that we're really not. And in multiple ways, but what I'm going to speak to is how the work of scholars of color is often judged. Isis Settles, Nicole Buchanan have done some amazing work on epistemic exclusion that faculty of color face. So that if they study topics that are related to their communities, that are focused on solving real problems, that are pushing the edges of critical thought and discourse, that's often viewed as outside of the mainstream and not as valuable as work that's more traditional. So that those scholars' work is devalued. And so when it comes to the tenure and promotion process, it's viewed as less rigorous, less good, less worthy of promotion. Or if scholars are doing traditional mainstream work, that questions come up about their ability to do it well, or how they're succeeding in the field, or because the criteria are fuzzy, they get ratcheted up a little bit to prove your worth and your ability, right? So those criteria aren't applied equally across candidates. I think the second thing that we really need to talk about is inequitable workloads and how invisible that often is, particularly when we talk about the experiences of women of color. That, as I mentioned earlier, faculty of color are asked to engage in diversity and equity inclusion work on their campuses, particularly in these times and in these moments that they're mentoring students. They're engaging in service in ways that are different than their colleagues. White women are also doing that work, but we see over and over again folks investing time and energy in these things that are really important, that are benefiting students, that are advancing the mission of the institution, but aren't central to the criteria that they'll be evaluated by. And instead of pointing at that person saying, you should say no, we should also think about, how do we count that work as real work and real labor and a real contribution, and actually change our criteria to reflect their contribution to the academy and to our progress. I think the third thing that we often don't talk about, though, that I just quickly want to mention before hopefully Ayanna can chime in, is that we assume that people are not navigating these structures and systems and that they're not getting tenured or they're not getting promoted. I think the culture and the climate of the academy also makes people say, like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, and that they're leaving. So that I think we have to account for the fact that some of that disparity isn't because people aren't successful. It isn't because they can't navigate or that they can't play the game. It's because they choose not to, and that they choose to depart the academy for other things to our loss. So I'll just end there.
Dr. Griffin, thank you. Dr. Lynch, any insights, experiences that you would like to share?
I think where Dr. Griffin left off is perfect. I was happy to pick that up. I was along the similar lines that although I don't in any way discount any of the statistics that you mentioned, I think it is equally important to recognize that advancing through the ranks is a general challenge and that the meritocracy is real and that for all the reasons that have been stated, there's lots of contributing factors to why people do not advance. Some of it can be what is considered the incentive to do so. We're already doing so much work. And so if you only get a slight bump in pay, the advance in rank, or it might come with even more responsibilities. And you're like, how can I possibly manage to do a single thing else? It doesn't look as attractive as it means, as it might look like on the outside. Like, why wouldn't somebody want to advance in rank? But if it comes with more, what might be perceived as more burden, less payout, I can understand absolutely why there are many people across all spectrum that might not be as an attractive option. But I do think it's really important, especially in the context of attracting and retaining the diversity that we do have, to take some real hard looks at what the structural problems and challenges may be that prevent otherwise talented faculty from advancing through the ranks. I think many of the things Dr. Logan said so passionately, I absolutely agree with. And it takes more than putting the onus on the faculty member to do the diversity, the member of the underrepresented group to look at themselves and to do everything that they need to. I think we would all agree that many represented faculty or people in society have adopted or been trained throughout their development that they have to work twice as hard to receive the same type of accolades or the same type of opportunities. And that is absolutely the case in tenure and promotion. I think that the points made about many people from underrepresented groups being looked at with a deficit. And if you could think about it, if I could just be honest, I appreciate that Dr. Logan kicked the door open for authenticity in this conversation to keep everything completely real. And that tenure promotion is not a very affirming experience. It feels a lot like hazing. And to Dr. Naylor's point that empowered women empower women, hurt and haze people also hurt and haze people. And so if we're not willing to have the conversations about what the process happens, I'm feeling a Hamilton soundtrack coming on, but what happens in the room where it happens, I think that's really important to recognize that it is not to say that it shouldn't be a confidential process, but so much of what happens and does not happen, so much of what who gets promoted, who does not get promoted, people don't really have to think about that because so it's hard for people to fix what they don't know, what is genuinely an issue. With regard to the tenure promotion process, people really should know well before they submit their portfolio, their dossier, what those challenges are. That goes right back to mentoring, right? So making sure that there's opportunities for people to know what the secret sauce may be or what the climate is, the culture, and how to navigate that success. That should happen well before it gets into the hands of the ART or anybody else for that matter. I think the points about workloads and equitable workloads is really an important one as it relates to why people are not advancing. That invisibility, I thought that was a beautiful way to reframe it because there's so much that people do, whether it's additional mentoring to students, whether it's just not feeling like as a junior faculty that you have the ability to say no because you think that will have some repercussions down the line. And also to many people from underrepresented groups, including women, to not have, and going back to mentoring, not having enough experiences where people have shown them that it is absolutely okay and appropriate and to to claim your worth, right? To ask for what you deserve and to not feel bad about it. Right? Sometimes we do extra and we do more, and then either implicitly or explicitly we're made to feel like we're asking for more than we deserve, or that we are asking for something that is unmerited. So I think all of those things absolutely are part and parcel. I don't think it's one specific structure. I think it's an entire system that we need to look at, and therefore there needs to be a multifaceted approach.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lynch. Very, very insightful, very helpful, and I appreciate your response. And everything all of you said is just excellent. It's wonderful, and I appreciate you sharing all this. It's very helpful. The third question is regarding current initiatives through the university system in Maryland. And we have 11 different institutions, and then we also have the Center for Environmental Sciences. The initiatives vary across universities, and some of that has to do with the size of the student population and some other things. There are numerous USM initiatives to advance minority faculty across the state. One of the most notable ones is the flagship university, University of Maryland, College Park. Recently announced in the Baltimore Sun back on April 22nd of this year, a $40 million investment over a period of 10 years combating racism and increasing faculty diversity. We applaud these efforts at College Park. We also recognize that not all the institutions within USM have that level of resources to contribute and set aside for increasing faculty diversity. Are there any strategies, and there's some others that I can mention as well. I know at the University of Baltimore, we have the Henry Welcome Fellows, where stipends are given to underrepresented faculty members. There is also the STRIDE program at UNBC, and there's the Faculty Advancement at Maryland for Inclusive Learning and Excellence, which is a diversity initiative. So those are a few of the current initiatives taking place across USM. USM does not administer those initiatives, so they're very much tailored based on resources and leadership at the top within the various institutions at USM. My question is, when you think back at your careers, are there, one, how can we increase initiatives, resources, and also are there any low-cost, high-impact strategies for doing this? And Dr. Griffin, I'd like to start with you, if you could share your response on that. So we're looking at whether resources in terms of mentoring, which all three of you have mentioned, can be very, very powerful, showing somebody the ropes, sharing what values and what your priorities should be, and also just assimilating people to the culture of the academy is very helpful. I'm just wondering if there's any initiatives you know that are out there, and also if there's any low-cost, high-impact strategies that you can think of in terms of advancing minority and female faculty.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So in terms of, and I'm at the University of Maryland College Park, and so we're super excited about the big investment that is being made, the big financial investment that's being made. But I do think we sometimes get caught up in the financial part. Like, yes, there needs to be money, there needs to be resources around, targeted hiring initiatives in particular, but people stay in environments that are inclusive, that honor them in their identity and honor them in their contributions. And while, yes, it takes resources to change climates and cultures, it also is more of a reflection of commitment on behalf of the leadership and really structured programming and thought around how do we change how we do the work that we do. So one of the initiatives that I've seen that's been really successful for faculty more generally, so certainly for women and men of color, but more generally, I think it's really good practice, are the launch committees that our Big Ten colleagues at University of Michigan has implemented. So when a new faculty member comes in their first year, they have mentoring meetings every month with 3 different people. So you have a team meeting with your department chair, a faculty member in your unit, and a faculty member outside of your unit. And it's this ongoing orientation program almost through your first year that's really helping you become acclimated to the institution, helping you get a sense of how do you navigate this space, but also how do you get off on the right foot in terms of your scholarly career, and allows you to build close relationships with these three people from the beginning. Doing something like that doesn't have to require a lot of resource in terms of finances. It requires people's time and it requires people's investment in the work. And I think that's certainly something that folks can do. The STRIDE work that's happening at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So really thinking about how do we do hiring? What are we looking for in our candidates? How are we more specific about the criteria that we are articulating in job postings, mapping those criteria to rubrics and actually looking for those things, being intentional about saying, we are looking for folks that can engage diversity, that are thinking outside of the box, that know about working with diverse populations, and making that something that we're actually intentionally looking for when we do have a hire is something that we can certainly do. And then the final piece, I think, around like transforming culture and climate, there's a lot of work that suggests that that community work that April was talking about, and feeling a sense of community and feeling a sense of belonging is really, really important. I think institutions could take more of a hand in helping people get connected and feeling a sense of connection to one another. I know in my own experience, I was a faculty member at Penn State before I came to the University of Maryland. And one of the major things that kept me at that institution were my relationships with other women of color faculty members. And they weren't just people in my unit, they were people from all across campus. What things are the institution doing to not take too heavy of a hand, because those spaces need to be safe spaces for folks. They need to be places where you can connect and say things that need to be said that sometimes you don't necessarily want to have overheard. But how are they being intentional about bringing folks together, making sure that they know of each other? How do we think beyond just the institution and thinking regionally? So are there University of Maryland system institutions that are close enough in proximity where critical masses of folks can be brought together to build community and to support each other, certainly in the work that needs to be done as they navigate tenure and promotion, but also the social part that we all need in terms of feeling a sense of connection to our colleagues. Those things aren't expensive. They just take a lot of time.
Yeah, very beneficial. And I'm thinking one of the challenges is, because everything you just said, I'm just nodding my head going, yes, yes, this is it. This is where it's at, right? And I think we have to think about how we balance all those service, that invisible labor that we've been talking about on this panel. One, how you can get credit for it and shows up when you go to apply for tenure, but also how we make time for that critical mentoring that is so important, that is really going to move people forward in their careers. And that's a challenge that we face, how to do that. I like your idea, and I'm going, how can we make this happen in 2021 or 2022 in terms of getting large groups of people together to share and to help navigate, like you described, and acclimate to different values in the system, right? In terms of how to be successful in doing this. So thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Logan, anything that you would like to add regarding diversity initiatives and increasing underrepresented minorities within USM or the Academy as a whole?
Yes, another resource that I have to admit, I don't know exactly what the total cost per institution is, but another resource that SU has just brought, some of us were using it as individuals, and I'm trying not to do shout outs because I have too many sister colleagues to shout out, and then I'm going to forget someone, they're going to be upset, whatever. Dr. Yuki Okubo really led the way in helping us get at SU the National Center for Faculty Diversity and Development. That's a wonderful program, and I'll put it in the chat. And so that has a host of resources as far as navigating academia, working on your publishing and writing, and once you have institutional membership, then your faculty have access to this wealth of resources, which, like you said, somewhat spreads out that work and labor that's involved in all that. This is another source that helps with that. I agree with Dr. Griffin said, not everything has to cost a lot. When I first arrived at SU, I had a small writing club. I didn't know about NCFDD, but you can start your own writing club to meet with colleagues. Of course, we ended up not only talking about our writing, but that's fine. Something else that was started under one of our provosts were called faculty learning communities. So, and this is another way that you can both make that community work count towards tenure and promotion. That's not necessarily discreetly in diversity and inclusion, but a faculty learning community can still bring together faculty, and it's on the record as a type of service. So faculty learning communities is another wonderful option that doesn't need a lot of money. I guess you can make, faculty learning communities can create their own budget. Something else is now our new CDO at SU, our Chief Diversity Officer, has also started to explore affinity groups. We want to be mindful of some of the things Dr. Griffin said about, privacy, safe spaces, but I mean, you don't have to have a CDO to do that. You can sort of try to reach out on your own. And I definitely want to say that there are a lot of sisters at SU and neighboring institutions and, on the administrative side and on the faculty side that, helped me along the way. So this is to say that you can create things at your institution so that it can count on the official record towards service, but there are also ways in which you can try to create that on your own in a very organic sort of manner. Another thing, I wasn't sure if it was clear about the white privilege. I basically was just saying that sometimes when we have privilege, we're able to say things in spaces that we wouldn't be able to without that privilege. Like I talk about my class privilege. I talk about my heterosexual privilege. I can get away with doing things that, an LGBTQ person cannot. So that's what I was talking about as far as using your privilege in those rooms. Just wanted to clarify that. But anyways, those are some other resources for, like we said, employing and increasing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Logan. Dr. Lynch, I'm going to ask you if you have any responses or comments, and I also want to let you know ahead of time that I'm going to start with you on the next question. So in terms of initiatives to increase and enhance faculty diversity, are there any other initiatives you know of, or in addition to the empowering mentoring programs and some of the other ones that have been listed here, is there anything else you can think of that you would add to that list of initiatives? Some may be low cost, high impact.
Thank you. And I was remiss in saying how excited I am to be part of this conversation, and it's for this very reason, taking copious notes as I'm listening. I think a lot of the said are phenomenal. I was also going to echo the just a low cost way to do it is also with affinity groups. I think that's the easiest, one of the easiest, quickest ways to engage individuals and to have a space, because a lot of this isn't so much about the work that needs to be done to be promoted. It's a space to navigate, to understand, to process and have the support that people need throughout the process. I would also say one of the things I've had the pleasure this particular academic year, although we're in the pandemic, I feel like many of us have been more productive in many ways that will lend to promotion opportunities later on. As many opportunities as there are for interdisciplinary research and writing opportunities, because some of it is about gleaning from other people in other places and spaces, not just within your discipline. It also gets you to learn from other people, engage with other people. Some of those very people we're talking about, who's in the room, right? To have people from other disciplines to also to speak to your work and to the caliber of your scholarship and your research and things of that nature. And the last thing I'll just quickly share is that it's important, going back to understanding what I think the first thing is to understand what the structural problems are at your institution, and use that as the jumping board to figure out what needs to be fixed and what needs to be plugged in. I want to shout out really quickly the USM Women's Forum, because I believe that could be also another space off of campuses to be able to find some of that mentoring, at least for women to have different opportunities to navigate that. And then one quick, at Howard University, there's a junior faculty development series that I came across that I was very impressed by, and that there's many colloquia specifically, not just for professional development, but it's an opportunity for junior faculty to present their research or things that they're subject matter experts on. So it also, allows people to see them share their research and their scholarship, but it also gives them opportunities to build some of the things that they need in their dossier. And then there's a very deliberate attempt to use the summer for junior faculty mentoring. So they are assigned mentors with a process that they can apply for. There's all kinds of co-curricular experiences that all make sure that there's advancement throughout the ranks. So I think those are just a couple of examples. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question, and I'm going to start with Dr. Lynch on this one, is regarding the current White House initiatives. President Biden has issued numerous executive orders. So these are executive policies to combat racism and increase equality, diversity, as well as cultural competency. And a lot of the things that we've been talking about on this panel that you all have shared and highlighted have really been back to the culture within universities and the structures that exist. And the goal of President Biden is to increase inclusiveness in the federal executive branch, including equal opportunity in regards to race, ethnicity, nationality, sex, also includes sexual orientation and gender identity. And my question is, how can USM institutions align with the current presidential administration, the current White House administration, and promote these democratic values? And it seems like some of the things we've been talking about that are needed within culture, one goes back to equality, equity, as well as transparency. And those are core democratic values along with diversity. So my question is, how can USM institutions align with this directive coming out of the White House?
Thank you so much. I first want to just, again, take this opportunity to say how important this kind of conversation is, and to really give credit to our USM institution for having the wherewithal to have such a public conversation and to think about these things and to use as many opportunities to get our best thinking around this. So I just want to shout out the USM for being open, first of all. So I think alignment is really, it suggests that we're not already aligned, that we're not already doing some of those things. I just want to make sure that it's very clear that regardless of what institution we're all doing this work, whether long before a mandate or an executive order came over. When I first thought about this question, I was reminded of how not that long ago there was an executive order to ban any conversation about critical race theory or any diversity and equity and inclusion. So it's welcoming to see that we have an administration that is committed to making sure that these types of conversations and these types of initiatives happen. I think USM institutions, particularly those where they recognize that there's more work to be done, can take advantage of the opportunities of the White House initiatives to find out what might be some grant funding associated with opportunities for leadership development, as well as opportunities to develop programming, or to use what available funds are to create centers and to use all the resources available that the White House is willing to provide to advance the work of each institution. So I think the main thing is to recognize where that alignment needs to happen, where those gaps are, and to continue to advance the work that's already happening at the USM at each institution. So my main suggestions would be to look to see what kinds of federal funds might be available to do that. I imagine if that's a priority of the White House, that there are specific funding opportunities that align with that, and use that as opportunities to encourage faculty to look at programming, curriculum, research, leadership around those. So there will be a win-win, going back to our previous conversation about advancing people's opportunities for tenure and promotion, but to use as an opportunity to realign and re-examine some of the initiatives that currently exist and to create new ones with this new opportunity.
Okay. Excellent comments. Thank you. And you're absolutely right. USM is doing a lot of great work, a lot of excellent work around initiatives, and some of the things we're already doing have aligned and I think fit very well with the current White House initiatives. And I think you're right. We're identifying gaps here, and where do we need to go, and how can we get there? So thank you very, very much, Dr. Lynch.
If I can add one more thing, I apologize. I just had another epiphany. What I appreciate about this particular forum is it's one of the first that at least I've had the privilege of certainly being a part of, but even watching, where there's a collaboration across institutions. And so if this is something that the USM is saying is a high priority, then, and again, it's not for us to go back to our silos and figure it out. I think it would be a great opportunity for as many of us to collaborate on doing this as a system of institutions to support one another. As a member of a faculty member at Bowie State University, diversity is obviously interwoven into our mission. It has been since 1865 when we were founded as the first HBCU in Maryland. But that doesn't mean that there are not areas for need of improvement. And then there's certainly other institutions who, using US as the example, with the recent influx of funds and opportunities. So there's great opportunities. I think we should capitalize on this momentum, especially with the backing of the White House, to collaborate as much as we can, and to do diversity doesn't just have to be in our respective silos, but diversity across the system, and to utilize all the resources and wealth of talent that we have here.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Dr. Logan, would you like to add any comments regarding the White House initiatives?
No, I think Dr. Lynch answered it great. And I think all the questions that we have to discuss kind of aligns with the White House. So I'm just, I'm invested in our dialogue here. But I think Dr. Lynch really answered that great. So I don't really have anything to add to it. Thank you.
Okay, great, great. Excellent. Dr. Griffin, do you have any responses?
Very quickly, I think reading them all together kind of reminds me that while all of these communities have different needs and different experiences, there's much that's shared, and that we have this opportunity to, instead of checking the boxes of like, this group needs this, and this group needs this, and this group needs this, to shift our mindset on how we support individuals with marginalized and minoritized identities, all with the goal of being a better and more just society. I think about Sylvia Hurtado's work in particular in framing diversity, and particularly in undergraduate populations or in student populations, as providing this opportunity for students to learn the skill sets that are going to help them navigate in our new, more diverse democracy, right? And seeing this legislation from the White House kind of affirms that that's a thing. As we think about faculty diversity, though, I think we need to bring that more into the conversation, that it's not just ensuring that our student body is diverse. It's not just ensuring that students are engaging with each other. Those same benefits around critical thinking and learning how to engage in perspective taking and see outside of yourself happen when you engage with someone who has a different identity than your own, who's standing at the front of the classroom. So I think it's just another way for us to make a link to, and faculty diversity is important because of this. I think sometimes we stumble all over ourselves knowing that diversity is important, but having a hard time kind of articulating why and what's motivating what we're doing while we're doing. And I think that these initiatives really just align beautifully with the gifts that faculty of color bring to academic institutions.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. The next question, and you all have hinted at this as we moved along, has to do with diversity in the curriculum. So when we are teaching, how are we reaching our students who come from underrepresented or marginalized populations? As faculty members, how can we weave in diversity, equity, and inclusion, what has become known as the acronym DEI, into our course materials and curriculum to illustrate we understand the importance of diversity and that we also promote diversity? For example, some accrediting bodies, and this varies across discipline, require DEI be incorporated into the curriculum. The Networks of Schools of Public Policy, Administration, and Affairs, NASPA, which is the background, the discipline I come from, public administration. In the graduate program, Master of Public Administration program, the accrediting body requires DEI metrics be woven into the curriculum, including student and faculty diversity. So over time, these outcomes can be measured. And we want to be able to measure them in very meaningful ways. So that would be one example of weaving in diversity into the curriculum. It also comes in the form of assignments, the books that are chosen, the authors of those books, who they are, and some other strategies. Dr. Logan, if you would like to kick us off on this one, are there anything, strategies we can employ regarding diversity in the curriculum?
I'm a teaching institution, so we could do like a whole separate like Zoom on this. We have a lot of amazing, like an amazing education program at SU. Like that's a whole, there's so much to go in there, but this somewhat relates to how I want to answer this question. I think that all of our faculty of color, our colleagues who are not faculty of color, not part of underrepresented groups, can get some training, educate ourselves, and get some pedagogy on it. But I always get a little bit concerned when sometimes I feel like diversity, equity, and inclusion is somewhat reduced to sometimes this idea of feelings, or like at my campus we just approved like a tagging model, and I'll be upfront, everybody there knows it. I really think that we should have done more. I think we needed a required diversity course and a tagging model, because what gets lost is, yes, we can all do more to infuse it in our particular courses, the textbooks that we read, the types of assignments that we create, but there are experts, there are entire bodies of knowledge and disciplines that touch upon diversity inclusion. There are people within biology who have a specialization that looks at these issues. There are critical race theorists. And so what I'm trying to get to is that campuses, I don't feel like campuses will ever be able to adequately incorporate it throughout the curriculum until they hire and retain more faculty in these fields. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not trying to be negative. I encourage people to do the interweaving. Again, that's a whole other conversation. You can, there's many books out there. The fancy one now is, anti-racist, how to be anti-racist, all of that. But that's what's really needed. Because a lot of people are usually teaching in these fields and specializations, surprise, are often people from these underrepresented groups. So that's what's really important. And I don't know a lot about this, I'll be honest, as far as the accrediting groups. But I really feel like if they're serious about encouraging institutions across the system to have more diversity incorporating their curriculum, maybe there needs to be some investigation in terms of looking at benchmarks or standards around hiring and retention of tenured faculty who teach in these areas. And so, and this is where we do have to go back to, yes, we want more faculty of color, but I often say it to students in my classes on English, there's not enough of us doing this work. How many scholars of Chicana literature did you see on campus or any campus today? Not many. But the point is, there's a lot of resources out there to learn how to interweave it. Like I said, maybe it's the people that you're assigning in your courses, the text that you assign, maybe the types of examples that you use in your class. Maybe you can have students do a presentation, maybe have them do a presentation. Who are some famous mathematicians from underrepresented groups? There's different ways to do it in STEM. Instead of having, sometimes it's in my field, there's the other representation. Okay, I'll put one Native American on there, one African-American author, and one woman. I'm done. Maybe instead of just one or two in that American Lit course, maybe 2 or 3, really thinking in a holistic way about how you're teaching the literature. So this is some specific examples, but right now I'm just trying to hold it down for, it's more than just feelings. It's more than thoughts, it's more than impressions. There are entire disciplines and areas that and scholars who specialize. We need to create more spaces on campuses to hire and retain these individuals and make them a part of the hiring. Another example sometimes I go to, a lot of English departments, you got like 3 people teaching Brit Lit, right? But a lot of English departments feel like we got one African Americanist, we're good. You got to teach everything from the colonial period up to the 21st century. I guess there's not much out there. That's not true, obviously. But my point is, thinking of a critical lens about the way departments as a whole conceptualize yourselves in relation to diversity and inclusion and who you need to hire.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Lynch, would you like to add anything to that?
I would love to. I also agree. This could be a whole forum in and of itself. This could be a week-long conference. Professional development, all of those things involved. I definitely, I have a great respect for Dr. Logan's points. I think that there are many experts out there doing this work. And I think that, again, if this is a priority and this is something that institutions value, that the USM values, that we need to do more about attracting, finding positions for and places and spaces for people to be actively involved in our institutions and to support whether it's curriculum changes or professional development, or to do the training themselves. I also believe, so I think using Dr. Griffin's phrase earlier, it's an and, right? I think it's that, and I do think absolutely it does need to be woven into the fabric of our education. Where I would like to start with that is really a mindset. It makes me cringe a little bit when I think about, the metrics and all the other things, because that sounds a lot to me like quotas. And I think that feel like as a mandate that we have to have a certain number of courses or a certain number of, tracking and statistics, I think it diminishes what we say is what we value. And if it's something that is important to us, then it'll be reflected in many ways just beyond the metrics and the check boxes and the number of people who are in particular categories. And so when I say mindset, I think that whenever there is a mandate or it looks like a quota or a metric, it's going to be met with resistance. And I think that one of the problems, if we could be very honest about diversity, equity, and inclusion, most people up until now, obviously the world is changing and people are reckoning with what this means and why it's important. But up until now, it's been something that has been very, it was always been an addendum or something people had to do. It was in another category. It was something that you did. It was very obligatory and it wasn't very meaningful, right? And so we have to be very intentional about what DEI means to us and why, and as Dr. Griffin mentioned, be really clear on explaining what it is and why it's important, not just to our institution, but to our education. And my position is that diversity just adds so much richness, understanding inequities, understanding other people's perspectives. If our goal as educators is to expose students to challenge their thinking and to really have them consider different ways to do things and approach life, that has to include a diverse body of experiences, not just with the books and the assignments that we do, but also just acknowledging the students that we have in our room. It requires us as faculty to do research on different cultures and different types of ways to approach different topics, the things that are of interest, the things that are important, the values, the norms, traditions of different cultures, and find ways to integrate that. I also think that we can take a constructivist pedagogy approach to this and not feel like we have to do it all ourselves. We have, a rich cadre of students who come from all walks of life, and we can invite them to share their experiences. That goes back to representation and narrative. All those things are really important. And so we don't have to feel like we have to look at every tip and tool about how to integrate it into our classroom. Education should be an invitation. You figure most of what students do, the syllabus is created before they get there, all the resources are chosen. And so if we really engage with bi-directional construction of what that educational experience will be, or invite them to give feedback about what we're doing and if we're meeting the mark for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that would add to that richness. And it would also show students and the institution that this is highly valued, and it would model for them the things that we want them to be able to go out into the world and do too. So those are just a couple of quick examples, but I do think it should be incumbent upon us as educators to educate ourselves. Just using the model from mental health, we have to be, in order to be culturally competent in dealing with a variety of clients, sometimes we have to educate ourselves on clients that we may not know about and get additional supervision or professional development. But sometimes it means asking the client or the person about their experiences and showing them that you're interested and you're intentional about learning more about them. And I think that that same thing could be modeled in education.
That's excellent. Dr. Naylor, we have about 6 more minutes before the top of the hour.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tatum. Appreciate that. Dr. Griffin, did you want to add anything to that real quick on diversity curriculum?
Very, very briefly, because my colleagues did a beautiful job and said everything that I would have wanted to say.
Okay.
I think just building on what Ayanna said, I think when I think of developing my first syllabus, it was by myself in a room, just writing things down. I think curricula need to become community property. So thinking about how can we use department meetings more constructively, maybe once a month, someone gets up and presents their syllabus and uses the benefits and the tools and the skills of the individuals in the room to make suggestions and additions, because we often don't know all the different people that we could be incorporating into our work, but our colleagues do. And imagine how that looks even more rich and even more different when we have more diverse colleagues in that room who can point out the limitations in your work. And it becomes not your syllabus, but the department's syllabus, and that it's a community activity. Students too, that students definitely, certainly should have the opportunity to weigh in and to add things that they might want to see. The second thing I want to talk about is pedagogy. I feel like, both of my colleagues have spoken to it a little bit, and I just kind of want to put a pin in pedagogy, that none of us really get the opportunity to learn how to teach very well. And that oftentimes we struggle with feeling like, I don't have the content. Like, how am I going to do DEI when I don't have the content? But you can be inclusive, you can be active, you can be engaged in your pedagogy, and that there are experts that can teach you how to do that, that we really need to leverage the expertise of the folks who are in our teaching and learning centers and make it not a, oh, it'd be nice if I had time to do, but something that we really insist that our faculty members all engage in training and preparation around how to engage in active and inclusive pedagogy. In the revision of our tenure and promotion policy at Maryland and the College of Ed, we added a note that and we expect everybody to be able to articulate how you are creating an inclusive classroom, how you are engaging in inclusive pedagogies. That's something that we certainly could do, which is a different way of thinking about bringing diversity into the curriculum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. In conclusion, I want to say, today what we brought forward, we've had 3 extraordinary panelists, and you have shared so much insight and experience, and you have provided concrete steps where we can have an actionable plan moving forward. And I want to thank each of you for creating this rich, robust, and honest dialogue and conversation today, which I hope is the beginning of many, many more as we move forward and we continue to increase diversity of faculty as well as students at our USM institutions. Our next panel that we're going to be doing through CUSF, it probably won't happen this academic year, but we'll start in the fall, is going to be one on students gathering and collecting their perceptions and how we can move forward in terms of meeting their needs as well. So this was part 2 of a part 3 series. Professor Tatum, is there anything you would like to close with today? I just am really appreciative of Coppin State University for providing this venue, this space for our meeting today. You were excellent hosts. We appreciate your hospitality and your leadership on this. And I also want to thank Dr. Elizabeth Brune for her leadership on CUSF. She gives us stability and support, and she brought this into fruition, and we are forever grateful. So thank you so much for making this happen today. Thank you all. And Professor Tatum, we opened with you, and I want you to have the final word.
Thank you very much. Actually, we're going to let Dr. Elizabeth Brunn have the final word. She is the chair of CUSF. Thank you all so much for attending. I have added in the chat a survey. And so after Dr. Brunn closes our program, please feel free to take the survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Aerian. Dr. Logan, I saw your chat room mark. So before I say thank you to everybody, I did want to say to you that those questions that came before from faculty members that we didn't ever get to address, we're gonna hold you all to the fire and ask you to come back and help us answer those questions, and we'll send them out. We'll email those answers out to people and let them know, because we're not done with this topic. We got a lot more to do. Let me just say that, before we bring this all to a close, on behalf of the Council of University System Faculty, I would like to thank President Jenkins for hosting this seminar at Coppin State University, and the CUSF members, Professors Anna Risotto, Aerian Tatum, Laurie Naylor, Lorenda Naylor, Ellen Schaefer-Salins, Daniel Aniwa, Mark Pound, Benjamin Ara, and James Manley for all the preparation and production work that they put into making this a stellar event. CUSF also would like to thank Professors Lynch, Logan, and Griffin for their hard work in presenting the webinar. The conversation on structural inequities was stimulating, productive, and insightful. Finally, I would thank Professor Naylor for her role as moderator. Her questions were a great kickoff to what we hope will be the beginning of a fruitful and constructive dialogue about structural inequities on our Systems 12 campuses. And on that note, I urge you all, please, to take a moment to fill in the survey link, which Professor Tatum mentioned, and it's in the chat room. It'll give us some idea of what you would like to explore during the next academic year. And I thank you all for attending CUSF's Town Hall, and I wish you to have a great summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thanks for attending.
Thanks.